This will be my last question. It's 10:37, so I think this will probably be my last question. Question number 6 says, could Matthew 24, 4 through 14, or some portion of it, simply be a warning against looking for signs of the end times, not a description of the end times? That seems to be his intended message in verse 6. So I just did a study on Matthew 24, so let's jump over there quickly. Matthew 24. And we'll just read verse number 6. And then I'll repeat the question again. Matthew 24 and verse number 6, it says, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. And so the idea here is that seems to be his intended message in verse 6, is that Matthew 24, the question is, or the idea is Matthew 24 just telling us not to look for any signs in the end times? Or rather than it actually being a description of what is going to happen in the end times? So basically he's just saying, don't look for any signs. I think I'm understanding the question correctly. Don't look for any signs, as opposed to these are the things that are going to take place in the end times. And the answer is that I don't think so. The question is, could Matthew 24, 4 through 14, or some portion of it, simply be a warning rather than a description of not looking for signs, rather than a description of the signs in the end times? And my answer is I don't think so. I think it seems clear to me that the disciples asked Jesus. It goes back to the disciples' question. What shall be the sign of thy coming, and what shall be the sign of the end of the world? Of the signs of the end of the world. And so they were asking specifically for signs. And I think that Jesus, throughout the discourse, is clearly giving them signs of what to look for the end times. Jesus gave them all kinds of signs. The signs mentioned, I think, align perfectly with what we see in Revelation chapter number 6. And so that's why I went to Revelation 6, because we know Revelation 6 is dealing with the end times. And at least I believe it is. Not everybody agrees with me on that, but I believe that Revelation 6 is dealing with the end times. And I believe those events that are going to take place in Revelation 6 align perfectly with what Jesus talked about in Matthew chapter number 24. But he says in verse 6, he doesn't tell them in verse 6. Notice, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. What really Jesus is telling them is he's saying, you will see these signs, but don't think that the end is about to happen. So Jesus is telling them to not look for signs. He's saying, no, you're going to see these signs, but when you see these signs, don't think that the end is about to happen yet. Why is that? Because he's going to go on to tell them in verse 15, this is the super sign that you'll know you're really close to the end when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. That's the super sign of the end times. That's the super sign for the Jewish people. When you see that sign, then you know that you're getting really close to the end. And then when you see the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, whatever that is, again, when you see that sign, then you know that the Son of Man is coming back. And so he's telling them to look for signs. He says, but when you see these signs, that the end is not yet. But when you see this sign, the abomination of desolation, you know that it's getting close. And when you see this sign, the Son of Man, or the sign of the Son of Man coming in heaven, then you will know that he is on the horizon and he is on his way. And so anyway, I think that I would disagree with the idea that he's just telling them not to look for signs. I think that he's telling them to look for signs, or telling them that you will see these signs, but just know the order of these things. And so I think that that would be my answer to that one. I hope that makes sense. Okay, we're at 10:40.